Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Tommy Gilmore with Noisy Bird Digital Marketing, and you are watching another episode of Wingin It. If this is your first time watching Wingin It, we talk to a different business owner every week, and the goal is hopefully by the end of this, you feel like you're winging it a little bit less. I'm joined today with Tim Leary from Handyman Services. They're located in Salt Lake City, Utah, or the Salt Lake area anyway. Tim, I'm excited to chat with you and learn a little bit about who you guys are, what you do. And I think that you come from a really cool background. You guys are building something really interesting. So I'm excited to chat today. Thanks for letting me take a few minutes of your time.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here and thankful for podcasts like this. It's how I learned everything. So the more granular we can get and the more open we can be with our answers and questions, I think the more everyone's going to benefit. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm a voracious podcast listener. I think I learn something every time I listen to a business podcast, or I just try to find people that know more than I do and learn from them. So it's really helpful. I'm glad that we're in the same boat there.
Completely.
So as we mentioned, you run a handyman company. You guys are starting Champion Service Partners, which is going to be looking to build and scale different home service businesses, but you don't really come from a service business background. Tell people a little bit about like your background, how you got started with handies, and how you guys landed on where you're at today.
All right, we'll dive in. And I sometimes can be long-winded, so cut me off if I start rambling.
Not a problem.
So when I was younger, I tried a lot of different things. Felt like there was a lot of cool opportunities out there, whether it was wanting to be a police officer, a firefighter, an actor, a doctor, a professional skier, an athlete, whatever it was. And I would really kind of lean in and become, we'll call it what it is, obsessed about these, individual things for a short period of time. And then it would lose my attention and I would go elsewhere. So I feel like I did that unintentionally along the way. But as I look back, there seemed to be a lot of intention in what I was doing, is really trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, because my path wasn't very straightforward. It wasn't that I was really good at one particular topic in school or one particular sport or had interest in one particular thing like many of my friends did growing up. So I was all over the place, but it really allowed me to gain great perspective on life and realize that you can accomplish anything. Doesn't matter where you start, doesn't matter where you currently are. Really what matters is kind of how you navigate every day, and you've got a dream and a goal in place on how to get there. So through school, I didn't really do very well, to be honest, and made it to college simply because I played baseball, and after 1 year that went away, and I just kind of ended up dropping out of college and working at a bar. And I learned there, again, having still kind of all over the place, that one of my regulars was a real estate agent. And after many conversations, he ended up paying for my real estate school, which got me into real estate, which was kind of the first, I'll call it first career that I started. And I ran with that for 8 years, which my career in that ended about 2 years ago, 2 years ago, May 2024, basically. So I did that for a really long time. I was really good at it. And so I just felt like, well, this is going to be my life. But there was always something missing. And that something missing was that I was always needing to be working in order to be generating money. And I couldn't really find a way in that industry where I could step away from the day-to-day and have things continue to be working behind the scenes or continue generating money. And that's what really started prompting me to look into building a business. So fast forward through all of that, my dad ran a lawn maintenance business for 25 years and was in kind of this semi-hybrid retirement, came out and just said, I'm looking to make a little bit more money, talking back and forth about what we should do. And I just said, a bunch of my clients need handyman work. I call you for all that stuff at my own home. So I'll just start sending you to my clients. And the ball started rolling and it just started picking up. I started doing research on the industry because I told him I'd run kind of the back end of it and he could just go and do the work and go home. And man, our first month, I think we did just over 10 grand in sales. And that just kind of opened my mind of like, wow, this is interesting. And then I figured out what the service industry is capable of on the back end of things. Started looking into HVAC, plumbing, electrical, $100 million exits, $200 million exits, multi-million dollars a year in revenue, and obviously became very interested and quit my job May of 2024. And that's kind of what birthed the formalization and growth mode of what Handy's is today.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love the story. You told me this, I believe, off camera, but you said that your dad kind of was just a solopreneur for 25, 30 years, just running his own business, getting out there, grinding every day. And then he hit this point that he's like, I want to retire, but I can't even really sell my business because the business is so reliant on me. Yeah. So for other people that are watching, that are in your dad's position, that want to build something, want to start to hire people, want to walk down that path and don't want to just work themselves until they can't work anymore, like what does that look like for you guys? How do you take, all right, my dad's really handy, he knows what he's doing, and now you guys have multiple handy people, you have multiple trucks, like how do you get it from just in the day-to-day all the time looking at somebody else's house to, okay, we have dispatch, we have a CRM, we have these things that build the infrastructure so that it's not just reliant on a single person like you were for real estate?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite questions because it goes back to the fundamental of what a business is and what a job is and the difference between the two. A job is something that you are required to go and do, required or not, right? You could be a solopreneur, but have yourself a job, not a business. And the key difference is, can that business operate without you, or is it reliant on you every day to generate revenue? And the way to kind of look at it in more of a magnifying glass is individual roles come down to, is that person the only person in the business who can do that job? Or is that job documented in a way that somebody can pick up a playbook, open it, and start with step one and know exactly how to perform the tasks that role in the company is responsible for? So the way I look at it is from start to finish. This is how we've kind of broken it down in a really simplistic way. Everything first and foremost needs to be documented. But as I was trying to do research, I'm like, what does that mean, right? Like, I still don't quite understand. What do you mean document everything? And so I took this broad approach and just looked at things from a wide lens and said, okay, a client calls us. What happens? What happens from that point all the way through to that client has now paid us and left us a 5-star review? What are all the components that need to go into that, right? Well, somebody's got to answer the phone. And then when somebody answers the phone, what do they say on the phone? And how do we make it that Chick-fil-A standard where if you say, thank you, they say, my pleasure. But it's not just that one person, it's everyone, everywhere you go to every Chick-fil-A. That's a system and process, an SOP. It's a standard way of doing things, right? So that means that if you call Handy's, you're going to get the same initial response, the same script, right? So we're creating a repeatable process, something that can be done over and over and over again, no matter who is performing that job. Okay, so now once they call and we gather their information and we do it in a very formatted way, right? Get the name, get the email, get the address, get the phone number, confirm all of that stuff, write everything down, put it into our CRM. Then you put it into the CRM, and then what happens? Well, you schedule it. Okay, well, how do you schedule it? What are the steps that go into actually scheduling it, right? So that's the wide lens, is from start to finish, what goes on in my job? A client calls, somebody answers, they schedule an estimate. Once that estimate's scheduled, somebody goes and gives them the estimate. They approve the estimate, it turns into a job. Once that's there, someone collects a deposit. Once the deposit hits, somebody goes and gets materials. Once materials are here, we schedule the job. Once the job is completed, we ask for a 5-star review. Once the review is completed, we do a happy call and we ask if they need anything else done. That's it. Yeah. So then you just have to write out, like, if I'm not the person, if I don't want this business to rely on me, I have to write down what I want this role to look like so that I can give it to someone else and they can go and do it. So those are processes that my dad didn't have in place, or that most solopreneurs don't have in place, because they just know it. It's just in their head. And so documenting those processes allows you to step away and have someone else step in to complete that role. So that's kind of the big difference between a solopreneur and a business, or a job in a business.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, especially with, for me, it's like the documentation part, it seems so silly or so dumb, because you're like, yeah, when a phone call comes in, you answer the phone. But then, like you said, the question then becomes, okay, but what do you say? Like what do you do when X happens? Like, you're documenting those things, and then, like you said, turning it into something repeatable. And for us, as the business owner, it might feel like, well, people know how to do that, but they don't. That's the thing. Like, so many people don't.
Or if they do, and then they quit, and you have to hire someone who doesn't, or who might not be as good, you're setting these people up for success. It's why people buy a franchise. A franchise is purchased because it gives you all of that. That's what you're getting when you buy a franchise. You don't have to create those systems and processes. You're buying it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally agree. It's the assumption that, well, I've done this for 25 years. How does this person not know what to say on the phone? Well, because you didn't tell them what to say on the phone. They're not the owner,
And I think that's the part that so many people miss. You hear, oh, people don't want to work nowadays, or, oh, like, I kept hiring people and I kept hiring the wrong people. And I think that there could be some truth in that. But I think more often than not, when I hear, especially solopreneurs, are like, oh, I've hired people in the past, it just didn't work. It's like, well, you probably hired the right person and gave them the wrong setup. You just didn't set them up for success. And 9 times out of 10, I would say that that's usually a fair assumption. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, completely. Yeah, I actually consult a couple companies, and one of them made that comment of, I've tried to hire, it's not working. And the conversation then became, well, 1, are you training them? 2, do they have is their job documented? 3, are you tracking what they do, right? Because people, like it or not, people aren't just going to come into your business and know what to do. You have to train them. But then if you train them, you're going to be really upset, because you're going to be telling them over and over and over again. So instead of telling someone something over and over and over again, write it down. And then there's no question. They just look at it, they read it, they do it, and it's being done exactly how you want it to be done. There's not much left up to interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. And those processes don't have to be perfect the first time either. That's something else that I've learned is, as I document, and as I've hired people and things like that, it's turned into, oh, okay, well, this didn't work in this situation, or, oh, that, this works here, but not here. And those evolve. I think so many entrepreneurs, we want to get it right the first time, and we just have to let go of the fact that we're probably not going to do that. But it'll take iterations, and it'll take honing and learning those things as well.
Yeah, 100%.
For you guys, what does that evaluation process look like? How often are you reevaluating or changing those SOPs as you put them into practice?
Great question. So we have KPIs that we track, and we do weekly meetings regarding those KPIs. So for example, I'll use our customer service representative. One of the KPIs that we track is her booking rate. Booking means new lead versus booked estimate, right? What that ratio is. And we try and target 80%. So how we know that something is off is if that goes below the target, we then can start looking into it. And when we look into it, we can say, we'll listen to some of the calls and say, well, what's happening? Why are we not booking 80% of the time, 80% of the leads that come in, right? We do free estimates. So like, what's the situation there? And oftentimes we can go in and find kinks in the script, right? You'll listen to 5 to 10 phone calls, and you'll notice that there's one piece that maybe isn't sounding right, or we're not being as direct as we need to be. We're kind of leaving too much up to the client to make decisions. And the whole point is to book the estimate, right? And so we tweak it. And so something like a script, although not an SOP, it is still a document that is a living, breathing document, just like an SOP. It's required to complete that job. So weekly, we are reviewing specific KPIs that directly relate to the SOPs that we have in place. And it gives us clarity into which part of the process is not working, so that we can dive in and look at it. Because the other aspect is, you're going to write an SOP down, you're going to hand it to someone, and you're going to expect them to do it. And if you don't own that, and if you're not following up on it, and if you're not making sure it's being followed, it's not getting done that way. I can promise you that. So that's why we have to do these reviews, is because if they're not doing it, you're not going to collect data to see if what you wrote down is actually working or improving or not working. And so you need to make sure everybody's on board to say, look, we're going to try this, but it's going to evolve. It's going to change. If there's a better way, we're totally open to that. And we'll make those adjustments along the way. But we can't know and collect accurate data on if this process works or not unless you do it exactly how we have it written down, so that we can identify what's going wrong when we want to make those changes. So that's how we do our reviews, is we have specific KPIs that relate to a part, every part of the process, the client journey, and the business and the functions of our business. And then as soon as those start slipping, then we know something's wrong. In the first place, we look at the SOPs and start listening to calls and start walking through that process.
That's awesome. I love it. Follow-up question with that: when you're going to set those SOPs or those KPIs, I mean, those are key performance indicators.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start with that? Do you look at your personal performance? Do you look at where you'd like those to be? Like, how do you set an initial KPI? What does that look like for you guys in your business?
So the best way to explain this is using conversion ratio, or the sales aspect. It's kind of the easiest to obtain the information. So conversion ratio, average ticket, and booking rate are three indicators for the sales aspect, right? So although we have a customer service rep and then sales reps, those are all tied together, right? Because if we don't book estimates, we can't go on those estimates. We then can't get any conversions, right? Any approvals. And if we're not getting approvals, we won't have an average ticket, right?
Yeah.
And so those three are super important. So obviously you look at where you're at today, right? What are we doing today? And that's kind of your baseline, because you always want to improve. So function of today is our minimum standard. Now, where do we need to cover the cost of our business, our operating expenses, like our salaries in our office and our trucks and our gas? What does it cost to run our business? And then you back into how many estimates you need, how many conversions you need, and what does your average ticket need to be? And that kind of becomes your goal. So you're looking at what you're doing now, you're taking into account all of your expenses and making sure that so long as you're covering those expenses, this is the bare minimum that we need to be at. So I'll kind of walk through an example. If our business expenses are $10,000 a month, and right now our average ticket is $1,000 a month, if we take a conversion ratio of 50%, that means that we need to do 10 jobs at $1,000 a month. But if we're only converting half of the estimates we go on, it means we need to go on 20 of those 20 estimates that month to convert 10 jobs to get our average ticket, which now covers our bills. But how many leads do we need to get there? And so then you say, if our booking rate is 50%, well, that means that if we need 20 estimates that we need to go to in person, that means we need 40 phone calls. And so that's how you look at those three indicators to say, okay, to break even, we need 40 phone calls, which will lead to 20 estimates, which will lead to 10 jobs at an average ticket of $1,000. So those three KPIs, we can look at each individual one every week and say, hey, our average ticket's really low, right? It's below 1,000. That's not going to be allowing us to hit our target unless our conversion ratio is higher, right? Mm-hmm. And then if we're not getting enough leads, or if we have a low conversion, that means it's a numbers game. We need more leads, right? So, or we need a higher booking rate. Because if our booking rate's 50% and we know we need 40 leads to get to 20 estimates, if our booking rate goes up, we need less calls. If our booking rate goes down, we need more calls, right?
Yeah.
So it's the best way for me to explain what a KPI is and how you can look at it. And then you just say, what's our goal? And you just back into it. So you say, our goal is $100,000 a month. Well, if your average ticket's $1,000, that means you need 100 jobs to make $100,000. Well, if you need 100 jobs and you have a 50% conversion ratio, it means you need to do 200 estimates. If you need 200 estimates and you have a 50% booking rate, it means you need 400 phone calls.
Yeah.
So now your target is 400 phone calls, 200 estimates, 100 jobs, $1,000 an average ticket. And that's what you look at every single week.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think that that's a perfect breakdown, because I think so many people, we're stuck in the day to day of our business and we don't even think about those KPIs, right? We're like, oh man, it would be great to make, whether it's $10,000 or $100,000 this month, whatever that number is. Probably if you're closer to 100,000, you are thinking about these things. But if you're close to 10,000, you're probably not. You're just like, man, it'd be great to hit that. Well, what's great, Tim, you just broke down exactly what you need to look at in your business to do that. And different businesses will have different KPIs, but it should be essentially the same, right? Like your average contract size, average job size, your booking rate, your closing rate, all those things play into how much money do I actually make when I do this. And then obviously material costs and those other things that go into it. But that was awesome. I appreciate you breaking that down.
Of course. Yeah.
So, as with any business, it doesn't come without challenges. You're almost 2 years in now. What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you guys have faced so far as a company? And what did you have to do as like the owner to navigate through that challenge?
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot. I mean, we're in a business where cash flow, which I'm learning in most businesses, cash flow is always an issue, right? Especially if you've got expenses. You need to make sure you have cash on hand. You could have great revenue. You could actually have great net profit, but what's the inflow and outflow of cash that comes in and out of your business on a daily, regular basis, right? And so one thing that really was a struggle for us that we had to navigate was cash flow, right? You're running up against, we have payroll on Friday and we've got, tons of accounts receivable. We're finishing up tons of jobs. So it's not that the money's not there. It's just not there right now. And so there's multiple ways to navigate this. We so far haven't taken on any debt or any loans or any line of credit or anything like that. But as I'm learning and evolving and as our business is growing, those are certain things that are tools, right? So a big one is navigating what type of line of credit or loan would be, most applicable to a certain situation like that you're going through in your business. And it doesn't mean, I think I've been naive to this and hard-headed about it, but it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It's a tool. It's specifically, there's a specific reason that it applies to businesses, right? And there's a specific reason people get lines of credit. It's not because you're not generating great revenue, having good net margins. It's because sometimes if you're on net 30 pay terms where you go do a job and it's a commercial property or something like that, they're typically not going to pay you for 30 days. So you need to be able to buffer in between. It's not that the money's not coming, but what does it look like short term? So those short term cash flow constraints was definitely and still is something that is always top of mind and always a struggle. And a line of credit is something that we're exploring because it's definitely something that we feel is going to be the most valuable resource for that specific issue. But what we did in the past is we looked at, okay, cash flow is an issue. Why? Because we've got jobs coming in. So that we can dig into it and learn. What we learned from that is that our overall labor burden for W-2 employees is significantly higher than if you have a subcontractor, for example. And so the reason of importance there is that if we charge, or if we're paying $25 an hour, essentially, there's going to be a very specific labor burden that is paid out on top of that hourly rate. So as a company, when you're paying somebody $25 an hour, you're not actually paying $25 an hour. You're paying $25 an hour plus 30% typically in our industry on top of that. And so, then we identify, oh, that's why we're running into cash flow issues. We're not charging the customers correctly. We think we are, but we're not paying $25 an hour. We're paying $34 an hour or something like that. So that's what we learned from that is how to accurately break down certain costs of the business and running a business, and then be able to charge appropriately so that we're covering those costs and it's smoothed out the cash flow for sure.
Yeah, no, those things are super important. And I like what you said, especially about some of the resources out there. I think it's natural to feel like, oh, like I'm doing something wrong because I had to go get a bridge loan, or I had to go do this thing. And like you said, those tools are there not because you're doing something wrong. It's there because it's a common part of business. And this is something I don't know a ton about either, but as you've kind of explored, lines of credit and things like that, what's something that you have learned through that process that maybe people don't realize?
Yeah, I think what type of loan to get is important. I think it's easy to assume that you need the easiest solution is to bring in an equity partner, but then that's probably the most expensive loan you'll ever get, right? Because it's unrealized right now what your business could be worth one day. And so by giving away equity in the form of, hey, if I give away equity, this person's going to give me money. You're essentially saying $100,000 of money into my bank right now, a loan from this person I'm giving them in exchange equity in my business. It could cost me $10 million one day, right? Or you could go out and let's say it's because you're struggling with making payroll. Or you could go out and you could get a line of credit, because a line of credit is a short-term, it's used for short-term things, right? So let's call it 6 months. And it's different for everybody, but the way we look at it is, if we pull a line of credit for $50,000, you're only paying on what you use. And so it's kind of there as a resource in the event you come into a situation where you're waiting for your accounts receivable to hit, but payroll's due, you don't want to not pay people. And so you get to utilize that for short-term services. And then your accounts receivable comes in and you pay that down. A longer-term loan, or like an equity partner, right? Those are used for overall growth or starting your business, acquiring assets, right? And they're typically going to be paid back over a much longer period of time. And so the best resources for small business, in my opinion, are an SBA loan, because it's going to be relatively the cheapest money that you can go out and find in terms of a loan. And then the second would be a line of credit, and the line of credit usage would mainly be for covering short-term expenses. Or if you have a really cheap company to start that's very cash forward like us, like it's not cheap to start, but it's like, let's call it $20,000 to start. But you're going to be making money the next day, or theoretically the next day, then you don't need a big SBA loan to go out and do that. You could use a line of credit for $50,000, use 20 of it, but because you're making money, right? So yeah, like if you've got a business that is developing an app, you're going to need a loan. If you have something like Handyman services, where you're performing services and getting paid at the end of that service, and it might take a day, and you could get a client tomorrow, then a line of credit is definitely something that is worth exploring.
Yeah. What would you say to the people that are kind of like you? They've not wanted to leverage debt. They've not really wanted to go that route before, and are pretty averse to it. What have you kind of learned through that process as far as that mindset?
If you believe in yourself, you'll sleep a lot better at night if you do have a loan or a line of credit. I don't think stress and the gray hairs that are definitely in my foreseeable future are worth it, just for simply the ego. I mean, really what it comes down to is you don't believe that the business is going to perform how you think it should in order to pay off that loan. And so you don't want to be stuck with the debt. That's the only reason you would not get a loan. Same here. I didn't know what this business was going to entail, but we've been running anywhere between 60 and 100 jobs a month for the last 2 years.
Wow.
It's pretty apparent that I can go get a loan and pay that back, right? I just was always like, oh, we don't need it. And then it's like, hey, we're looking a little thin for payroll, and it's like, oh, here we go again. The same stress I had when I started the business, I'm not to say that's going to ever go away, but it just gives you a little bit more of a time frame in order to solve problems or take advantage of opportunities. There's definitely things that we would have taken advantage of financially, but we rely on cash flow in the business. And as we're a new business, we don't have a lot of reserves, and therefore we couldn't take advantage of an opportunity. Or if we did, it made things really tight. And so you just are kind of avoiding certain things that are very avoidable with tools that are very resourceful and necessary to grow and scale a business. I mean, growing is expensive, and you don't know that until you're running out of money. And so that's what these are designed for.
Yeah. No, that's great. It definitely changes my perspective a little bit. Hopefully, if you're watching as well, and you've been against wanting to get a loan, hopefully, like you said, you'll believe in yourself, you'll believe in your business, and believe that the places that you want to take it are worth going, and that you have a tool that can get you there quicker and with less loss of sleep than anything else.
One really important thing that I don't think is taken into consideration: banks do want to make money, obviously, right? There's 2 points that I want to make. A banker does not want to take your house. They do not want to take your business. They don't want to do any of that. It's way more work for them. All they want to do is get paid back, right?
Yeah.
And so if a lender is giving you money, and for a business, you have to provide, what does my forecast look like? What does my business do? How do we make money? So the banker is looking at everything. They're not just looking at your credit and like your income. That's actually, they don't really look at that, right? They look at credit and certain things like that, but it's not like buying a car where they're looking at your credit history and your income from your job. They're looking at, what does the future look like for this business, and what is the capital that I'm providing going to do for them? And so why I say that is because if they're giving you money, if they say yes to you, that means that a bank says, we believe in you. We're going to give you $100,000. So you should also take that as, I should believe in myself. So it's just something to consider. If you get approved for a loan, it's not because they don't they need to understand your business. They need to look at it, and then they need to make a decision. It's based on risk for them as well, right?
Yeah.
So if they're making a decision, then you should be comfortable with that, because they don't want to lose their money.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So with that, if people are watching and they're like, okay, what do I take then? You said a forecast, you said some of these things. What are some things that, if you go, how do you kind of mitigate that learning curve? What kinds of things should you bring into a bank if you're looking for, a payday bridge or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we just learned this, so it's not like I have had this knowledge for a long time, but we bank with a big bank, right? One of the, let's call it the top 4 banks. And one of the most important pieces of advice that I used to always get from a friend of mine's dad, a businessman that I admire, was make sure you have a great relationship with your banker. And I never quite understood what that meant. And so I would continually go to my bank and say like, hey, I need to make a great relationship with a banker. Mm-hmm. And it's like a new person every time I go. Like every 3 months I go to the bank, it's like a new person, right? And so I started realizing like, oh, I just don't know what he means by that. Luckily for me, we were selected to be part of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, which if you haven't, you should definitely look into that. And it's essentially a master's degree condensed into 14 weeks on entrepreneurship and your business. You have to be a business owner. So you're taking all of this and applying it to your business. And lending was a big part of that the lending conversation and how to use it as a tool. What I learned from that is that the relationship aspect is coming from more like smaller community banks, where you can actually be sitting down, you can text them, you can call them, you're getting that really one-on-one resourcefulness. A big bank is going to decline you right away because they're not going to meet with you. They don't know anything about your business. A community bank is going to take more of a risk because they know you and they believe in you and they believe in your business and they are intimate with your business. They see what's coming in, what's going out. They know what your cash flow looks like, right? Because they're your banker. And so there's going to be a lot more of a developed relationship, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to get a loan if you bank with somebody like that who you have direct access to. So community banks are definitely the way to go, and we're switching as fast as possible so that we can have that relationship. But for tangibles, I don't know yet of like what the bank specifically needs, but I do know basics are obviously your EIN, your LLC, that information, access to last 2 to 3 years of tax returns and cash flow statements. And it's not 2 to 3, you don't have to, it's whatever you have, right? But if you've got 2 years to 3 years, bring it. Legal documents, making sure things like your spelling of your name is the same on your LLC as it is on at the bank and stuff like that, right? Just all those little minute details. And then they just want to see what you're using the money for. So you have to kind of have a plan of action there. A line of credit's a lot more loose. You don't really need permission. But if they give you a loan to go buy vehicles and you take that loan and you go buy a restaurant, right? Like obviously that's not allowed.
Yeah.
And so you need a plan, and they need to review that. They need to audit it. They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. But yeah, it's really like, what are we going to use the money for? How is it going to support our business? What is it going to do for our cash flow? How are we going to pay it back? And building a relationship with a smaller bank.
That's awesome. I appreciate the insight, and especially learning about the advantages of working with a community bank. That's really cool. So you talked about like getting the phone to ring. having, knowing your numbers, knowing your KPIs for you guys. I know that you and your wife work together. She's kind of in charge of the marketing. You're in charge of some of the other back end. What have you guys learned in running and marketing a handyman business? What have you tried that failed, or what have you tried that you're like, man, I wish we did this a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, there's a shameless plug for her. She developed our brand in an industry where brand is largely the last thing people think about, right? And that single-handedly has catapulted our success to the point where she's now designing home service brands for people in Australia.
Oh, cool.
I mean, like because of the popularity of our branding. So I will say that her tagline for branding is, it needs to be so simple that you don't have to work to understand it. So if you look at typical service vans from these big private equity firms driving down the plumbing ones, and it's got like a million decals on it, it's got the big, huge character in your face, yada, yada. It's like, these are all of our services. Here's QR codes. Here's everything. That's a strategy for sure, right? Obviously it works because they're everywhere. But her approach, which I think is so much more appealing, obviously, I'm biased because it's our brand, but whatever.
And you married her, so you have to like her a little bit.
Exactly. But it's clearly it's starting to pick up. As she doesn't do that for a living, but now she kind of does, right? Because people are reaching out because they love her style of branding. And so what her thought is that like we don't have our phone number on the side of our van. We don't have our website on the side of our van. We don't have a QR code on the side of our van, or anywhere really. We have one small phone number on the back of our van. And the thought is that if we're driving down the street and if we're flying past you at 65 miles an hour, all you need to know is the name. Because what are people going to do? They're not going to take a picture of your van and then call you, like zoom in and find the phone number and call you. They're just going to look at the picture, remember the name, and Google it, right?
Yeah.
And so the biggest thing with branding is, it's her slogan of, it should be so simple, you don't have to work to understand what you do. But on the flip side of that, it should also, like we've kind of created this term or coined this term, it should be a wearable brand. What I mean by that is, obviously you see the hat that I'm wearing. We sell hats to the point where one of our friends was at the Red Fest in Utah. It's like the country music festival that they had, casually just walking through this crowd of 100,000 people, and saw a random girl wearing one of our hats and walked up and said, "Oh, do you know Tim and Mel?" And the girl was like, "Who's Tim and Mel?" "Well, how'd you get that hat?" And she's like, "Oh, I saw them at a parade and I loved their hat, so I went and bought one." So the theme of a wearable brand is that people don't have to use our services to know about us. Yeah. You walking down the street at the mall or at a concert and someone's got one of your hats on, that's free marketing. It's free brand awareness, right? So that's what a good brand can do for you. It can expand beyond just the services you provide and really, really kind of integrate it and weave itself into the community. And so the caveat with that, or not the caveat, but ancillary to that, or the next step would be your branding has to be very cohesive across all of your marketing efforts. So when someone sees our van and they say, "Oh yeah, you guys drive the brown and orange vans," like that we get that all the time. Well, they better be able to go to Google and type in Handy's and see a brown van, right? Mm-hmm. Or see the van somewhere, or see the color scheme somewhere. So it's very cross-functional, and that's very important. Your website has to be the same. Your yard signs have to be the same. Your vans, your uniform, everything has to be really cohesive. So it's very memorable and easy to consume. So we've really learned that branding has a huge impact in an industry where most people don't focus on it at all. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then, man, is it? I don't want to say it's easy to get leads, but if you know what you're doing, you can dominate in the home service market, especially in niche markets like Handyman, because most Handyman are referral and repeat business only. And so if you're active online in terms of running Google ads and focusing on local service ads and your Google profile, maximizing that, you'll have no problem getting leads. So that's kind of, digital marketing is definitely something that we've focused on as well. And that's kind of been the short-term bridge to brand awareness, because branding takes a long time to catch on. That's why most people don't do it. You also can't typically see a very physical return on it, right? Because you might have seen your van and then seeing you at a parade or seeing a billboard, but they're not calling you because they saw the billboard. They're calling you because they're aware that when they need a handyman, they have seen a billboard, a van, a yard sign, a door hanger somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So it's really difficult for like CFOs and stuff to look at branding and say like, oh, we're going to spend that much money on a van wrap. Wow, that's you know. But yeah. So the leads, the phone calls that you're paying for, you know, are vital to allow you to build your brand awareness over time, which will eventually reduce obviously our cost per lead.
Yeah, no, I love it. I you know, as a marketing person, I think that branding is so important because, like you said, if it's consistent across, then you start to see, oh man, I've seen you guys everywhere. You know, and that's the goal of branding versus marketing. Marketing, yeah, you get the name out there, like it gets you the lead, but the branding, like you said, really is about the culture of the company, like how people perceive you, what they see. And, you know, I love the idea that if people are driving past you guys, they're not worried about the number on the side or anything like that. They should just see like the cursive, it's distinct. It's on your website, it's on your hats, it's on, you know, it's behind you. It is consistent across. So you guys have done a great job with that.
Yeah, there's a term that I learned about called being omnipresent, or like an omnipresent marketing approach, which essentially means you want to be everywhere all at once, and all, you know, like anywhere someone turns, they can see you. And the cool part about that is that's a really good way. Branding is a really good way to look bigger than you actually are while you're growing, because people trust companies that seem like they're put together. So you're building that trust, but you might only have one van. You might, I mean, I can't tell you, when we wrapped our first van, the amount of text messages I got with pictures of our van, and they're like, God, you guys are growing like crazy. And I'm like, we have one van, you know?
Yeah.
But they see our yard signs everywhere. They see, and that's the problem with a lot of people, is they'll just throw a yard sign in randomly. And it's like, well, no, like if you're doing marketing, if you're tracking your data, you should be able to see which zip codes are performing the best. And then you should just overload that specific area, geographical area, with all of your marketing, all of it. You should put door hangers out. You should put yard signs out, so that every turn somebody makes in that neighborhood, they're like, I can't get rid of these guys. They're everywhere. And then all of a sudden it's the reticular activating system that kicks in, where they say, I need a handyman. And it's like, oh, handies, you know, like we've seen them everywhere. Let's give them a shot. So
yeah. No, I love it. I think that it's super important. I like what you say also about being simple. I like the book Building a Story Brand. I don't know if you or your wife have read it or anything like that, but if you're watching and you haven't read it, basically the biggest thing is, he says, if people have to burn calories to figure out your brand, then they're just not going to. Like they're not going to try to figure out, oh, what does this mean? For you guys, it's awesome. Handy's is great. It's a simple color scheme. It's really easy. You guys have done a great job of, like, it's simple, but it's really effective with what you do. So I think that's really cool. Yeah.
It's the #1 compliment we get. I try and say, like, look what I've done, you know, like, look at how well the business operates. Look at the, you know, the data. And they're like, data, operations, like, the brand is awesome though.
Yeah. Marketing's a little sexier than operations. That's for sure.
Yes.
Well, the last question I like to ask people is just about, like, the best piece of business advice you've been given. You talked about a mentor. It could be from them, or it could be from a podcast you listened to, but I don't want to just hear what the advice was, but I want to hear, like, how you implemented it and what implementing it did for your business.
Yeah, I think it started our business. I, again, like I had mentioned, wasn't somebody who was really interested or passionate about real estate, always kind of had one foot out. Only reason I stuck it out was because I was really good at it and, you know, I was doing well. So one of my clients, in fact, I ended up getting into kind of a higher level of clientele, a wealthier level up in Park City. And what that did for me was kind of expose me to the possibilities, right? When someone's buying a fourth house that's $5 million, it's like, what do you know, I can't help myself but say, like, well, what do you do for, you know, and like learn about them and learn about their lifestyle. And those people often become, like, a lot of those people later in life, like, really want to give back and they want to share their information and their knowledge, and it, like, gives them satisfaction, right? And so as a young, energetic, positive person who is, like, really trying to, like, do better in life and learn, they can sense that there's a level of humility to that, right? I'm not trying to be someone I'm not, but I'm really interested in what you do because I want to live the life that you're living. It's interesting. And so what this gentleman gave me this advice. He said, that most people who want to start a business think they have to come up with a new concept. They have to invent something, right? And that's how you're going to make all your money. But where the best businesses are built is solving a problem in the current job that you have. So what do you do for work? You're in real estate right now. So what's a problem that is in your industry, right? Because you do digital marketing, or if somebody does handyman, right? Like if you're in the space as an employee and you don't own a business yet, what are things that you could be like thinking of that would make something better or make something easier or solve a problem that exists, right? Then you take that problem and you do a little bit of research. How many other people in this industry are running into the same issue? And then you go to those people once you've proven, like, okay, it's like a 3-step process. Find the issue, see how many other people deal with that issue, and then identify how much someone is willing to pay for that issue. Then you've got a business, right? So for me, how I applied that, it literally started our business, right? Because I was in real estate and I could not for the life of me find a reliable handyman. So when my dad came and said, like, hey, I'm looking for things to do, he's a handy guy. It was like, oh man, this would be super helpful, because every time I connect a client, like that's what makes me a good real estate agent, is people trust me, so they come to me. But if I can't deliver a reliable source, then they're not going to come to me again. So Dad, can you please go and help my clients? Just show up on time, charge a reasonable rate, and like do good work. And so that was an issue. And then I started seeing how well it was working for my clients, and I started turning to the people to my left and my right. And I was like, do you guys need a handyman? Do you guys need a handyman? And they're like, oh my God, for the life of me, I've got like 30 in my phone and none of them are handymen anymore. They've either moved, they're general contractors, they don't want to do the small stuff anymore, or they're unlicensed, uninsured, like they ghost me, I don't hear from them. Boom, there's the business idea. And then fast forward, taking that same principle and saying, but how are we going to differentiate ourselves in business in the handyman space that we're already in? So now, kind of, if you already own a business, this is how you could go about that same advice, is what are the common issues in our industry, right? We've now chosen the industry we want to go into, and then how do we solve those, and would people be willing to pay for it? So a good one is they never answer their phone, or they told me they'd send me an estimate and they haven't, or I call the office because they didn't show up on time. Like I don't get a hold of anybody. So, okay, great. So it's important to you as a client that someone is able to answer the phone when you have a question. Yes, it is. And you'd pay more money for that. Yes, I would. Great. Well, let's hire someone let's solve that problem now. And that's what's going to differentiate us. So you use the same framework of identify an issue, see how many people are dealing with that issue, and then is it something that people would be willing to pay a premium for? There's your business idea. But you don't have to be an inventor. You don't have to start the next Facebook or build the next electric car. You don't have to do that, right? Take an industry that's already existing, it already works, and make it better.
Yeah, I love it. Me and my business partner, we have the I don't know if it's an honor, but the distinct experience of, he has worked with other marketing agencies. He's a director of marketing for another company. So we get a good inside glimpse because they've gone through a dozen marketing companies. So when we started, he could say, hey, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly of working with a marketing company. And every time we hear a horror story from somebody about, oh man, we worked with this company, they did X, or, oh, they did this, it was great. We put it down on a little notepad and we say, okay, how do we implement that? How do we do that? I joke marketing's the second oldest profession. As long as there's been something to sell, people have sold it. But it's nothing new. But how do we, take that, innovate it, make it better? And I think that you guys are doing a really good job of that. And something that's really cool that you're doing is you're helping other handymen do the same thing through school, right?
Yes, absolutely. So we are doing that through a school platform. And the reason being, I always like to share the reasoning. I don't want to be a coach, right? That's not really the intent there. But the purpose of it is because our industry specifically is very fragmented and we're all kind of doing our own thing. Now, if I want to professionalize this, if I want more people to be interested in the industry, which will increase our exit valuation and increase kind of our opportunity at Handy's, then we all as an industry kind of need to start growing in the same direction, if that makes sense. So what we've done is we've essentially figured out the operating side of the business and the foundational operating system, how the business should work, who should be in what position, how to scale it from 0 to 1 million, And we give that information away. And the reason being, again, is not to be a coach. It's not to, do any of that stuff. I consult on the side, but this is more of a, here's the modules, here's the information, here's exactly how we built our company and currently run our company from 0 to over $1 million in revenue in an industry where 95% of us are in that $200,000 to $500,000 revenue range. So implement the best practices. It's the SOPs, it's the, how to price jobs, it's how to, how we do our marketing, what sources we do our marketing. And I really do give exactly what we do, and I give it away. So that's the purpose. And yeah, I do that because I know in the end it'll help us, and it'll help people along the way as well.
That's awesome. Well, if you're watching and you own a handyman business, or you're even just curious about what that looks like, the name of the community is Handyman Business Academy, right?
Yes, on School, SKOOL.
Yeah, so school.com, and then Handyman Business Academy. I'll put a link there in the description of this video. But I think it's really cool what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. I mean, $1 million just in 2 years of business is pretty freaking incredible, especially in a business where most people aren't doing half of that. And so I applaud what you guys are doing. I'm excited that we got to chat today. Is there anything else that you kind of want to plug or talk about before we go?
No, I'm just grateful for the opportunity, and hopefully someone learned. I learned, every time I have a conversation, I try and learn something. So yeah, I hope that this resonates with people, and I'm always more than willing to jump on a call with anybody who's kind of wanting some advice or input, or has something to share.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sitting down to chat with me, Tim. Thanks for taking the time, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched to the end. This was a good one. Hopefully this helped you learn how to wing it a little bit less. Been Tommy Gilmore. It's Tim, and we'll see you guys next time with another business owner.